What's the most shocking thing the quiet kid in class has said? Story 1. Our quiet kid was Tommy. Tommy never said anything, ever. Out of all the lunches we ate at our table senior year, I think Tommy was the only one who never told a story or even added anything to the conversation. He just always sat in the same spot along the wall, eating his lunch and laughing occasionally at our jokes. One day we were sitting in the cafeteria eating lunch and sharing stories like we always do. My friend Raymond had spent the previous night with a girl named Haley. She was 2 years younger, but already had a reputation of hooking up with a lot of different guys. So he was telling us everything that went down, kind of bragging, even though nobody was really impressed as we were aware of Haley's reputation. Anyways, Raymond gets done telling his story, then proceeds to pull out his sandwich. I think it was some sort of fish. It didn't look very appealing to Raymond or us, so he says, "This looks disgusting, but I'll give it a try anyways," and proceeds to take a bite. In pipes Tommy. "Is that what you said about Haley last night?" Everyone explodes into laughter, drawing the attention of the entire cafeteria. Raymond is just sitting there mid-bite, stunned. I'm bent over in pain from laughing. Others are on the floor. One guy ran to the bathroom because he thought he was going to puke from laughing. Even Ray had to laugh. I never noticed him laugh, but Tommy had this sly grin on his face the rest of the lunch hour. Perfect setup, perfect execution. Story 2. Nothing. Let me explain. I took a class with Sunghui Cho, the Virginia Tech shooter, one semester before the shooting. The class was called Contemporary Horror. It was a one-time elective offered by my favorite professor. We read horror novels and watched horror films and discussed the craft of creating scary stories, but also how they reflected or represented their era's fears. It was a great class. There were only about 15 students, and it was discussion-heavy. Cho was one of them. I honestly never noticed him, even in that small class, until halfway into the semester. He wasn't quiet, he was silent. So on the day we all finally noticed him, our professor asked him something directly, and Cho just stared at him. I can't remember the question, but the nature of it meant silence was potentially an acceptable and funny response. So we all laughed, except Cho. He just kept staring at our professor. Our laughter awkwardly died, and after a few moments of uncomfortable silence, our professor just said, "Okay," and moved on. It was so strange. But I forgot about that weird moment until after his rampage. The professor later told me that Cho's papers had been disturbing, but the nature of our course meant the envelope was being pushed a bit, and it had never been bad enough to suggest he'd do what he did. That professor was a good man, and he admitted he struggled with not blaming himself on some level for one, not identifying how severe Cho's mental health problems were, and two, for the graphic and terrible nature of some of what we watched in that class, which may have inspired Cho. He knew that was bullcrap, but a part of him couldn't help but feel some blame. It was terribly sad. I still remember hearing about that when it happened, and honestly, that professor shouldn't blame himself. A mind like that is already in a bad place. There's no way he could have been sure he was exposing Cho to more stuff he probably shouldn't see. Story 3. This douchebag kid who constantly fricked with people was in line with the quiet kid and the quiet kid's friend. The quiet kid is a bit overweight, so when he gets up to the lunch lady and gets his chicken nuggets, the douchebag says, "You don't want extra nuggets, big guy?" The quiet kid, out of nowhere, just starts ranting, "No, I am all set, but what are you up to this weekend? You want to hang out, grab some food, maybe frick a bit? I'd like to be on top, and you look like a bottom. What do you say, want to frick tonight?" The entire line is dead silent. The douchebag starts getting all peed off and acting like he's going to start a fight, and the quiet kid says, "Okay, fine, you can be top, baby." The douchebag kid leaves the entire line laughing their butt off at his expense. No idea if the quiet kid was gay or he just knew that even jokingly suggesting the douche kid was a homosexual would upset him more than anything. But I do know he left the line with his delicious chicken nuggets and a huge smile on his face. Story 4. So this isn't so much what he said. The seniors played locker pinball with the underclassmen. It's exactly what it sounds like. They bounced one little guy constantly, made him late for class a lot because they'd keep him bouncing so long. Well, one day they were bouncing him and he super politely said, "Please stop, you're hurting me." Obviously, the seniors bounced him harder. Apparently, that was this kid's breaking point because he leapt on to the nearest senior who just happened to be our star basketball forward. The little freshman bit into the senior's neck and literally tore a mouthful of skin off. He just stood there with this piece of bloody skin on his shirt, growling at everyone. Needless to say, no one ever fricked with Mad Dog Mike after that. Holy crap. Well, I think that may be a step too far, but also frick those seniors for that crap. I'm not sure why faculty and stuff weren't doing anything, but they provoked it, so they kind of brought it on themselves. Story 5. I was in marching band in high school probably 7 years ago now, and we had this huge muscular guy as our brass instructor. He would always yell at us to nail these chords or you're not playing loud enough. There was this little Asian trumpet kid that was so innocent and nice, he barely ever spoke a word. One really, really hot afternoon, our instructor was being especially loud and said, "Why don't the trumpets blow hard enough?" Dead silence across the field as all the brass are waiting for the next instructions. Then we hear, "Why doesn't your mom blow this wheelie hard enough?" from a quiet trumpet kid. Needless to say, we all laughed, got push-ups, and laughed some more. Story 6. One of my students hardly said a word all year until a couple weeks ago. I was trying to get a group of talkative ones under control, and she had enough. She yells out, "Shut the frick up! I'm trying to work, you frickin' buttholes!" Awkward silence followed because I didn't know how to handle the normally studious and quiet one losing it. I was like, this is middle school. Not exactly quiet, but I never really socialized except with people right beside me in the form of asking for a pencil. One day, the classroom douche happened to be more douchey than I could stand for, and I stood up out of my seat and yelled at him and sat back down. The entire class fell silent, but he never got that douchey again. Story 7. I went to middle school and high school with this boy named Daniel. Never once heard him say a word. A friend of mine said he would whisper sometimes. The night of our senior party, we heard some music coming over from the corner where the karaoke machine was set up. At first, no one really noticed him because people had been singing on it all night and most people stopped paying attention. But this was different because no one was singing and the music was playing. The DJ stopped the music and started the song again. Daniel was standing there looking frightened, but this time around when the song started, he began to sing. Everyone in the room stopped what they were doing and just crowded around him. He wasn't a great singer by any means, but 99% of the people in the room hadn't ever heard him talk. When the song was over, everyone started clapping and cheering, and he walked away with a big smile on his face. I like the feel-good stories the most in this thread. Good on you, Daniel. I hope that evening really helped him feel more comfortable. Story 8. Kid, I've never heard you say anything loudly. You need to shout something out. Quiet kid. What? Kid, shout something. In the middle of a classroom, a full-blown high-pitched roar is heard. Quiet kid. Christmas! It was a Muslim kid who didn't even celebrate Christmas. What a dude. Man, Christmas sucked for Muslim kids at school. Teacher would usually bring little gifts, get super paranoid that I'd be offended, and hasten to find something religiously neutral as opposed to the gift everyone else got. Frick kaleidoscopes. Story 10. Playing rugby, a chur fails completely at lineout. Someone shouts jokingly, "Does anyone know a good Acher to replace Patrick?" Quiet guy on the team, never hear him say anything. Maybe Patrick's mum can help. Proceed to fall on floor. Ah man, hacker jokes. I miss rugby. I missed that joke, but I know nothing about rugby. Please advise in the comments. Story 11. My butthole is this big while making a circle with her fingers. Edit. Lots have asked how big it was. It was probably the size of a euro. Not too big, not too small. Just like Goldilocks' butthole, I'm sure it was just right. And no, unfortunately, I did not check the old turd cutter out. I failed you. I'm sorry. I feel like a butthole about this big. Story 12. In kindergarten, there was this kid, Donatel, and he never said a word. He was nice enough, played games and everything, but completely silent. One day, we were looking out the classroom window as a cop drove by. Donatel opens his mouth and says, "Police car." At the time, we were all excited to hear him speak, but looking back, that kid must have had some real dark history. Living in a sewer with 3 brothers and a talking rat who forces you to do karate all day does that to you. Story 13. In high school, there was this really quiet girl named Grace. She was a pleasant person, but wouldn't say anything more than hi or sorry unless you asked her something. Even then, she'd appear terrified. It was at prom, and I was in the parking lot of the venue we had prom at. I lost a contact and had to run to my car to grab my glasses. In the parking lot, Grace was smiling and walking from her car. She looked at me, laughed, and said, "Ryan, her prom date, just fingered the frick out of me." I still laugh about it to this day. Turns out sometimes you just need a little prom nasty to open you up to the world. This comment should not be taken as advice. None of you in high school listen to me. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 14. So this one kid who barely ever said 2 words one day asks the teacher for the time. It was at some after-school thing and there was no clock. The teacher says the classic, "Time for you to get a watch," which for some reason was funny to everyone else. The quiet kid doesn't laugh. He looks at the teacher dead in the eyes, and once everyone quiets down, he says, "So are you going to tell me the frickin' time or what?" We were in like 7th grade. Can't blame him. Can't tell you how many times I've heard that stupid joke. Story 15. Wow, literally this question came at a perfect time. I was just thinking about this, and it was by far in sophomore year of high school. This kid was so odd that honestly no one ever really noticed him, but one day he's sitting across from me at a table and he sees this one girl in really tight shorts and goes, "Goddamn, I could have my head up her butt for months." It was pretty shocking. Dude could have worn her like a hat. I honestly hardly know what I just read. My brain stopped at, "It was by far in sophomore year of high school." What? Story 16. In college, our fraternity had a pledge who was clearly awkward with girls, but was otherwise a really cool guy. Normally, Dan was super proper and a bit shy when talking to girls, but not this night. On this night, when Dan was asked about what kind of girl he wanted to date, he told our sweetheart, the kind of girl who loves to have her pee crushed. I'm not sure if Dan ever crushed any pee, but that line became a staple in our frat for a while. Story 17. In high school, I had first-level Spanish with this kid who was super quiet. At the end of the year, we all had to give a speech in Spanish in front of the entire class. This mother effer stood up and gave a speech not in Spanish, but in a language that he had spent the entire year inventing. Story 18. In junior high in the mid-'80s, the game Trivial Pursuit was all the rage. We played it in math class one day, and this kid, Gary, who never said anything at all, totally spanked everyone else by answering every single sports-related trivia question. He got a lot of attention for it, and I believe he walked a little taller that day. I don't think I ever heard him say anything else, but I did see him sitting on the bleachers at a few sports events. It was the moops. Ah, the 80s, when all you needed in order to gain some popularity was 6 little pieces of colored pie and an infuriating yet fun trivia board game. Those were the days. Story 19. My dad is very quiet, to the point that it makes most people uncomfortable, even me sometimes. One day we're at the park and a woman walks past us and my dad quickly says, "What if I punched that woman in the face and said, 'Sorry, I thought you were my wife'?" That's my kind of humor. Story 20. In class, he asked the woman teacher if he could go to the toilet. She sternly replied, "You've got 2 minutes, Richard," and Richard said, "2 minutes? It takes me that long to unravel it." Teacher goes red and everyone loses it. That kid is an absolute legend. Richard for president. Hey, we don't know how old OP is. Maybe Richard actually became president. And he was not a crook. Aroo! Story 21. We sat in the classroom, I think in 5th grade. My friend had done a PowerPoint presentation about Eminem. He talked about how he lived in a trailer as a young boy. And the quiet, straight-A student stands up and says, "Just like you," and asks to use the toilet. No one understood anything of what just happened. We live in North Europe. There's practically no one that lives in a trailer here. My friend didn't. Story 22. The quiet kid from my grade stood up one day, grabbed a broom, and stood on a chair and began trying to swat bees that got inside. One bee landed on the window where quiet kid proceeded to yell, "Die, bee, die!" and then swatted and shattered the window. He screeched when it happened and then sat back down. Never heard him speak again. That man is going to Valhalla after a bee-related incident. Story 23. Jeremy. This guy was so silent that we believed he was a mute. The school had just recently painted the bins in all kinds weird styles. As our group was walking somewhere at lunchtime, we passed a bin that was covered in handprints. He offhandedly goes, "That bin is handy," leaving us dumbfounded at his pun bomb. Thought this was going to be a Pearl Jam joke. Well, I didn't get the Pearl Jam reference, and to call that bit of wordplay a pun bomb is perhaps a little generous, but also a bad pun is oftentimes better than a good pun, so I get it. Story 25. I was best friends with the quiet kid in middle school. It wasn't so much shocking as the stupidest thing I've heard him say. He got his 1,000-yard stare all of a sudden and just said, "I can't remember what color my dog is." Similar to a friend of mine. The thing about rain is that it makes mud. Story 26. Quiet guy I work with never said much until he came up to me and asked, "What happens when an Eskimo comes?" Before I get the chance to respond, he throws a handful of ice at me and walks away. Story 27. Giving a presentation in class, pulled out a screwdriver and said, "I could kill you, and you right now." If I remember correctly, it was on safety, but he still got suspended. Story 28. He started to attack someone in my class with a table when the teacher got a cup of coffee. That was quite something. Story 29. What if we killed everyone with cancer to stop it from spreading? Well, this video had to end somewhere. Guess it was too much to hope to end on a high note. Ugh. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.